I'm going to talk today briefly about the role of the NITAG in the introduction of new
Vou falar sobre o
vaccines.
papel do NITAG na introdução de novas vacinas.
Next slide.
Próximo slide, por favor.
I'm going to give a little
Vou
background,
falar pouco sobre o background,
talk about benefits of
falar
having a
sobre
NITAG in the
benefícios de
general
ter
sense,
o NITAG,
discuss the role of the
E os-
NITAG in introducing new vaccines, and talk about NITAG role in Immunization Agenda 2030. Should I go on? Is everything okay with the translation? There was some, I think it's,
Yes, I think we figured it out. Just one.
okay. Okay, great. Next slide. Yeah, next slide.
Next slide. Is this okay?
Yeah, next slide. Okay, great. Oh, yeah, no.
Which one? This one?
That
I think?
one. Yes, that one.
Okay.
Great. So this is just a
Portanto,
figure from
isto é apenas
WHO.
uma.
Actually, now the simultaneous translation, I think, is, I can hear it. I can go on, but should I just continue?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Can we just
So,
give a 20-second pause? I think we just need
okay.
to fix
Okay,
it.
sure. No problem. Yeah, it's always tricky in these remote.
Okay, I think it should be fixed.
Okay, great. Okay, so NITAGs are part of the WHO Immunization Policy Advisory Framework, as shown on this figure. At the global level, of course, we have SAGE and WHO technical advisory groups, and these groups work mainly on global policy and recommendations and strategies. At the regional level, we have regional immunization technical advisory groups, and at the national level, we have the NITAGs, and these groups work on recommendations for national policies and strategies. So next slide. Thanks. So here we see a map of countries that have NITAGs in 2019, so our most recent complete data, and that have met some or all of the current WHO NITAG functioning criteria. And this map is actually taken from the NITAG Resource Center, which is a really great resource, and the link is noted on the slide. There's a lot of information on this resource center. And you can see that most of the remaining countries without NITAGs or not meeting all criteria are located in the African region. And in 2019, overall, globally, there were 170 countries that had established a NITAG, and 123 had met all criteria for a minimally functioning NITAG. So quite a bit of work to do, and some of the regions have a little bit more work to do. So next slide. So this is just a reminder, what is a NITAG? It's a body of national experts that provides technical and scientific guidance to the government on immunization policy, norms, and practices. So in this way, the NITAG is both a technical resource and a deliberative body to empower the national authorities and policymakers to make evidence-based immunization-related decisions. And the basis of the decision-making is disease epidemiology, clinical characteristics, vaccine and immunization characteristics, sometimes economic considerations, as well as political and public health considerations. So this is particularly important in view of, complex and vast bodies of evidence we have, the need to adapt recommendations to the local context, and the global interdependence and integration of health systems. So next slide. Great. So here I just wanted to summarize, that NITAGs make really important contributions. So a NITAG contributes to robust and fiscally sound government decision-making through several ways. And it's just always good to really understand these so countries can advocate, strongly for NITAGs. So by increasing credibility of the government, by improving its capacity for rigorous evidence-based decision-making, minimizing pressure from outside interest groups, including industry and anti-vaccination groups. This is very important. By providing transparency, by eliminating real or apparent personal conflicts of interest, And in the event of an adverse event from immunization, NITAGs can be really important in neutralizing public backlash. So next slide. Great. So here we see the NITAG traditional process of NITAG goes through. And just for a review, you know, when it makes a recommendation to introduce a new vaccine or really anything related to vaccination, doesn't always have to be a new vaccine. So at the beginning, there's a broad policy question received from the Ministry of Health. And this policy question is then refined and focused using the PICO technique. Please do another click. Yeah, great. So that uses the PICO technique, population intervention comparison outcome, to define the framework and criteria that are going to be evaluated. Next click. Then the full NITAG, then the Secretariat supports a working group or a designated part of the NITAG, if the NITAG doesn't have working groups, to gather the evidence and analyze the findings. Next click. Then the full NITAG meets to discuss and draw conclusions and finally make a recommendation. So the Ministry of Health takes this, next click, takes this recommendation and then decides whether or not to adopt the recommendation and how it will be implemented. And normally this process takes from 1 to 2 years. And always important to remember that the Ministry of Health is always the decision maker on adopting a recommendation. So next slide. And just because we are in the middle of a pandemic, there are some differences in the process that has occurred with the COVID-19 vaccine. And the steps are basically the same, but there are some important differences, mainly in that the NITAG is working with much more limited data. And there's usually limited supply of the vaccine, at least early on. And this necessitates the clear identification of priority groups. You can do the next click. So priority groups for vaccination, depending on the phase of supply. In the next click. Also interim recommendations, you can do another click. Also interim recommendations are often made, which are refined as more data becomes available. And so, you know, usually there may be recommendations that are updated or changed and routinely for NITAGs, but for COVID-19 vaccine, this has been much more emphasized. So the two main differences, the whole process is usually completed in less than a year, which has been seen for COVID-19, and there are much more frequent meetings of the NITAG. Okay, that's just a little background on the process. And next slide, please. So I wanted to bring up one other issue that NITAGs may be involved in the introduction of new vaccines, and this is concerning vaccine confidence and vaccination coverage. And we usually like to think about the vaccine confidence continuum, with vaccine hesitancy being one part of that. Now here in this slide, I mentioned vaccine hesitancy because it is how it is often referred to in the published literature. And WHO placed vaccine hesitancy as one of the top 10 threats to global health in 2019. But I think we are trying to talk more about vaccine confidence and demand. Because we think it does capture these issues better. So NITAGs play an increasing role in advising governments on approaches to address confidence and improving coverage. So several reasons why NITAGs are positioned to be so important is because they use evidence-based decision-making, they're multidisciplinary, they're transparent, and they seek stakeholder input. And this is really important in dealing with vaccine confidence issues. So NITAGs have made recommendations, for example, on action plans for improving vaccine confidence with locally customized applications. And those are culturally sensitive, culturally appropriate. And these include such things as you've probably heard about this, tailoring immunization programs or TIP. And this is like a toolkit for addressing understanding reasons for poor vaccination, poor confidence and lower uptake of vaccines, and then developing interventions. NITAGs have also debated the issues on mandatory vaccination and made recommendations and for or against these requirements. And there's been very diverse outcomes for countries on this. Some countries do have requirements, some don't. And there are just some resources at the bottom. So this is a really important issue and one that NITAGs really have become somewhat involved in. So next slide. Let's see. So, I'm sorry. Oh, so as far as immunization agenda, or IA 2030, NITAGs play a pretty prominent role in that. So NITAGs are involved in strategic priority 2, which includes commitment and ownership and accountability. And one of the key areas of focus under commitment and demand is to strengthen evidence-based decision-making with input from technical groups such as NITAGs. So they do play an important role in that aspect. Implementation of IA 2030 will be supported by technical input from experts, including NITAGs and RITAGs, and will build upon guidance from SAGE to help ministries of health prioritize programmatic areas. So they also play an important role there. Strategic priority objective indicators. There are indicators as part of IA 2030, which will be used to monitor progress. And mechanisms for analysis and interpretation of indicators will be developed, and platforms for regular evaluation will also need to be developed. And these will likely include SAGE meetings, RITAG meetings, and NITAG meetings. So these are all going to be areas where progress is presented and discussed, and maybe recommendations for how to make improvements. So specifics are really under development, and these will all be country specific at the end. But it's good to remember NITAG role in IA 2030. So next slide. And that's really all I was going to talk about. And I am very happy to answer any questions. And somebody also put in